Look at that. This looking sexy.
Hi, I'm Joe, and welcome to Motor City Boat Werks. Let's get to work. Today in the Boat Works, I'm going to be working on the deck of the Skipper 20 sailboat. It's time to kind of get everything prepared so that the deck can be painted. It's one of the final stages of this small sailboat restoration. But more importantly, I need to go ahead and finish the remaining teak wood that's on the exterior of the Skipper 20 sailboat. So this episode is going to be all about how do you finish teak on the exterior of your sailboat without removing it. If you're new to the channel, I bought this boat in September of 2023. It's been sitting inside my temporary shed outside the boat works all through the winter. This summer, I started an ambitious program of trying to restore the boat and get as much done on it as I possibly can. The Skipper 20 is a classic little trailerable sailboat. It's 20 feet long. It has a very salty appearance. It's kind of unusual. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, there were about 400 of these boats ever made. This Skipper 20 restoration is an excellent example of how you go about restoring a small sailboat, all the things you've got to think of, the various steps involved, the kind of skills you need, and how much effort it's going to take. Be sure to check out my playlist on restoring a small sailboat. It'll bring you up to speed on this particular project.
This is one of those projects that anybody who has an old sailboat, is probably having to deal with. You've got teak wood on the boat, some type of exotic wood on the boat. And over the years, when it's 20, 30 years old, it starts to look pretty rough, right? And it turns gray, maybe it starts cracking, maybe it's a little unsightly. And you want to do something to kind of preserve it, keep it looking good. Wood that's been restored looks really good on a boat, and it can really make a difference and make the boat, look years younger than it really is, and frankly, make it look like somebody cares about it. So the issue is well, how do you do wood that's already on the exterior of a boat? Do you pull it all off and get down to bare decks? If you're going to pull off the teak, well, you may as well pull off all of the fittings, all of the cleats, all of the blocks and pulleys, all this kind of stuff. Get everything, all the cam cleats, get everything off of the boat, maybe even the tow rail, get totally down to bare fiberglass, patch everything, restore everything, paint the deck, and then reassemble it, reseal it. This is a monumental undertaking, believe me. Ask me how I know.
Refinishing the teak on your sailboat restoration project is an important step. It's one of those things that just makes the boat look like it's been taken care of. There are some folks who will leave the teak on their boat. They'll go all natural. But I've talked about this in another episode. The problem with not refinishing your teak is that over time, it will dry out and it will crack. No matter what you do to it at that point, you'll never be able to bring it back or have any utility out of it. You've got to maintain the finish on your teak over time. And the only way to do that once the teak has already deteriorated is to sand it down and kind of refinish it back to something better than it was. I have a series of videos where I talk about how to repair teak, how to refinish it, what materials you should use, and your different options. You're going to want to check that out. Now, in addition to refinishing the exterior wood on the sailboat, I've also decided to remove the rub rail. I'm going to replace that down the road. We'll do a separate episode on that. The basic process of repairing and refinishing the teak on your sailboat is the same as if you had pulled the pieces of teak off the boat and you were doing it inside your workshop. The only difference is that everything's got to stay in place, and you got to figure out a way to refinish it without damaging your deck. I want to be clear, refinishing teak in place on a boat, any boat, is really a last option. You don't really want to do this if you're doing a proper restoration of your little sailboat. The reason is because it's very difficult to get in all the nooks and crannies of the teak and at the same time not damage the decks or cosmetically mess up the boat. It's always preferable to remove the teak, repair any damage that you have, go ahead and refinish it, and then reinstall it onto the boat using marine sealant or what have you. This is the only way to guarantee that that everything is watertight and that the teak is really in the best condition that it can possibly be in. You can leave the teak in place. You can try and refinish it where it sits, but you're always going to be wondering, is there a leak somewhere that you don't know about? Is the teak really in its best condition? Are there cracks that you can't see? Is there water migrating into the wood someplace that you really don't know about?
In a separate episode, I'll talk about all the details of how you refinish and paint the deck of your restoration project. For now, we need to focus on refinishing the wood, and we do that before any sort of painting or non-skid work on the deck of the boat.
If you watch my channel, you already know Motor City Boat Werks has no sponsors. I get no compensation from any of the products or the companies that I talk about on my YouTube channel. I do put links in the show description for some of the items that I use if you want to try and find them. Amazon does pay a small commission if you use those links.
There are times that it makes sense to go ahead and refinish the teak in place. For example, if you're doing a very simple restoration, a budget, quick restoration, well, you don't really want to pull off all the pieces of teak and have to worry about refinishing them and then reinstalling them back onto the boat. This can create a whole bunch of problems that you didn't really have in mind when you started your budget. In my case, and for illustration purposes, I think we're going to leave the teak in place on the Skipper 20 sailboat. Everything on the exterior of the boat, I don't want to pull that up. I'm going to leave it where it is. We're going to sand and tape everything off, and then we're just going to refinish it in place. I would only recommend that you refinish your teak in place if you had a really good understanding that there are no leaks, that none of the deck fittings are leaking, and that there's no reason to pull anything off of the deck. And in my case, the Skipper 20 seems to be pretty watertight. It just seems like the wood needs to be taken care of so it looks a little bit better. There are times when removing the teak pose more of a risk than, say, leaving it in place. If you're worried about the teak itself becoming destroyed or damaged, or even the deck being damaged somehow during the removal process, it might be a good idea just to leave it in place and try and make it look as good as possible.
I only have 3 or 4 pieces of teak that I need to redo on the boat, and it doesn't make sense to remove them, either because I'm afraid if I remove them I'll actually destroy them or tear up parts of the fiberglass on the boat. Some of them are glued in place and I just don't want to disturb that. Now, it's not going to be as great as if you remove the piece and did it separately in your shop, but you can get a decent finish if you follow a couple of steps.
The first thing you need to know about refinishing your teak in place is it's all about preparation. The wood has to be very clean. You're going to want to wash it and scrub it as clean as you can get it before you start sanding. It's all about having the teak be as clean as possible and then sanding it as best you can. This is not the time to cut corners or to try and get through it quickly. It can be an uncomfortable and miserable process trying to clean and sand the wood while it's still on the boat. In the overall scheme of things, preparation and sanding takes up about 80% of the time. Only 10 or 20% will be actually applying the finish and getting to where it looks good. Wherever you can, on large flat surfaces, you're going to want to use a palm sander. You can use 60 or 80 grit sandpaper, but you want to be very careful about accidentally taking off too much material. Anything you can't reach with the palm sander, you're going to want to try and do by hand. It's a very tedious, uncomfortable process. Sometimes sanding by hand is just not feasible, and this is where I suggest that people use the snake. Now, I've talked about this tool before. It's basically a rotary tool with a flex shaft, and then you use some sanding drums to get in all the nooks and crannies and sand as best you can. Be careful not to damage the deck, and be careful not to remove any marine sealant or anything to cause any leaks. I've found it's not uncommon to spend 1 to 2 days just doing the preparation and the sanding on the wood. What you want to see is the old gray teak transformed into this golden brown color. Once it has this gold color and it's smooth to the touch, you know that you've got a good clean surface. The bare wood is ready to be refinished. The next step is masking. You've got to tape off everything except the wood. Whether you use varnish or epoxy or Sikkens Cetol Marine, you've got to tape everything off because it'll get all over the deck. Even though we're going to paint the deck at a later date, I want to minimize the mess as much as possible. Masking is a skill that you use on a variety of boat projects. The more you do it, the faster and better you get at it. Now is not the time to use your typical household DIY blue tape. It just doesn't give a clean enough edge. What you want to use is the yellow tape from 3M. This is 3M automotive tape. I use it on all of my epoxy and marine painting projects. It gives a really nice edge. Once you've done your prep work and everything is taped off, now is time to refinish the teak. There's lots of different products out there you can put on your boat teak, but I'm a big fan of Sikkens Cetol Marine. I tend to use the Cetol Marine natural teak as a base coat and then the Cetol Marine gloss as a finishing top coat. I talk about the advantages of this product and all of my tips and tricks for applying it in the other episodes, so I won't repeat those now. I don't get compensated in any way for recommending this. It's just something I've been using for almost 30 years. I use it on all my boat restorations. There's several versions of this product. If you're interested in the differences between them, be sure to check out my prior episode where I experiment with the different colors. The typical refinishing schedule goes something like this. I apply a base coat to ensure that the wood is evenly coated. I apply as much product as possible to ensure that the wood kind of drinks it up. Just make sure there's no drips or runs. After 24 hours, I'll apply a second coat. Down the road, I might apply even a third base coat.
Look at this. That wood is looking sexy.
At this point, I'll take some time to sand down the teak to get it back to a dull, smooth surface. The whole purpose in doing this is to take down the ridges so that the wood becomes smooth. The whole purpose of the prep and the masking and getting everything ready is so that these initial coats can be applied relatively quickly. You just want to get everything covered and be sure not to miss any spots. Apply extra coats where the wood gets a lot of wear. The wood surrounding the companionway, the first couple handholds, these are places that get a lot of use and the finish will wear off faster than everywhere else. The nice thing about Sikkens Cetol Marine is you can go back and forth through these steps. If you mess something up, you just sand it a little bit and apply another coat. Once the deck is repaired and repainted, I'll come back, I'll tape off the deck, and I'll apply at least 2 coats of the Cetol Marine gloss. Now this is an important tip. You want to remove the tape as soon as you can after you're done doing your applications. You don't want to leave the tape in place for an extended period of time. No more than 7 to 14 days. You definitely got to get that tape off of there. Over time, it might deteriorate, and when you try to take it up, it will shred, or you'll end up having glue residue and stuff left on the surface. So pull it up as soon as you're done with it. If you follow these steps, I promise you, even as you finish the base coats, it's going to look so good. You're going to be motivated to finish the rest of your boat restoration project. I got a few more coats of top coat that I've got to do on the exterior wood, and we'll call this project complete. But in the meantime, I've got to get started on the deck and doing all of the prep work to put down some paint and non-skid on the deck of the Skipper 20. I'm still hunting down components and designing the plumbing and electrical system for the pocket trawler. Those episodes will be coming in the future as the weather changes and I return to working back inside the boat works. That about does it for this episode. I want to thank you for stopping by. We'll see you next time. Stay motivated.